So in the last video, you get introduced to this idea of formulating your research question in terms of an independent variable and a dependent variable. Now in this video, we're going to make this a little bit more specific by defining exactly the variable types in your research question. Okay, so what types of variables do we have? And let's start with a question. What is a variable anyway? And a variable is simply something that varies, or you could also say it's something that has several levels. So let's see what exactly that looks like for different types of variable. First of all, we have numerical variables, which is something that varies from low to high or from high to low. So examples could be the number of friends, the amount of sales, or body weights. The levels of these variables are numbers, and these levels vary from low to high or high to low, depending on how you look at it. Okay, another type of variables are categorical variables, and these are variables that vary without any ordering of the levels. So examples could be gender, with the levels being male and female, or occupation with the levels being accountant, manager, analyst, researcher, etc. And examples could be nationalities with levels being Indian, American, German, and so on. And the main difference here is that there is no natural ordering between the levels. There's no notion of high or low. The levels are basically words, and it doesn't really matter in which order you put the words. Okay, then when exactly is a variable a numerical variable, and when is it a categorical variable? And this depends on how you define the variable and also how you choose to measure it. So let's take an example. Let's take depression. On the one hand, you could say that depression is a numerical variable because you can be a little bit depressed, you can be a little bit more depressed, you can be very depressed. So it is something that we can think of as a numerical continue. But on the other hand, you could also argue that no, depression is this clinical condition which is qualitatively different from being healthy. Depression is not just when you feel a little bit sad, not just when you feel a little bit unmotivated, but when you're literally unable to live your life, when you are unable to work, when you are unable to connect with your friends. So in that case, you could argue that it doesn't really make sense to think of depression as a numerical variable, but it makes more sense to think of it as a categorical variable, where the levels are healthy versus depressed, and in fact, even pretty much every numerical variable. Let's take, for example, the number of friends. You can also think of it as a categorical variable because what he can simply do is divide people into people who have an above average number of friends and people who have a below average number of friends. And when you do that, then you basically turn a numerical variable into a categorical variable because now the ordering of the levels doesn't really matter anymore. Low versus high is the same as high versus low. So whether a variable is categorical or numerical really depends on how you define it and how you measure it. If you only ask people, do you have a lot of friends? And they can say yes or no, then your number of friends variable is basically a categorical variable because people can only answer yes or no. But if you ask them for a number, then you are measuring a numerical variable. And at this point, it doesn't really matter what you pick for your research question. You can use categorical variables or numerical variables. And then later as we go further in the course, we will see what the consequences of these decisions are down the rows. And then if you later realize that you actually want to turn your numerical variable into a categorical variable, you can still do that. Okay, so the key lessons of this video are, there are two main types of variables. There are numerical variables where the levels are numbers. There are categorical variables where the levels are non-ordered words. And whether a variable is numerical or categorical depends on how you define it and how you measure it. Okay, let's practice this a little bit. In the next video, I'll see you in the next video.